Hello everyone, my name is Michael. I am a violinist and composer working in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, and today I'm going to be tackling one of the staples of classical literature, and that is Beethoven Symphony No. 5 in C minor. My analysis presentation deals with the fourth movement of the symphony, and I highly recommend listening to the entire work at least once or twice before continuing with this video. The last movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is a large sonata form. This has an exposition, development, recapitulation, and a large coda. The exposition and recapitulation each consist of four main themes. Of the four, two are standard Kaplan themes, the second being a sentence and the third being a period. The development consists of a pre-chord, a chord, and a retransition which lands in the dominant key. This is followed by a brief return to the third movement, followed by the restatement of the primary theme and the recapitulation. Now that we have all of the major introductions out of the way, I'm going to dive right into the exposition. Here is the beginning of the exposition. The opening C-E-G tonic triad has become almost as iconic as the opening motive of the first movement. As I play the first section up to the first cadence, pay special attention to the different harmonies and chords used. This entire first section consists mainly of cadential progressions between chords 1 and 5. Besides that, there really is no harmonic movement. Because of this, it seems very likely that this is actually an introduction leading into an actual P theme after this cadence. In contrast to the first section, the second section after the cadence is a very well-grounded theme type, being a sentence. The French horns provide the presentation, and the violins offer the continuation. As I play this next section, try to decide whether or not this is actually the P theme. The presentation played by the French horns here gives the indication that we are going to hear a standard theme type. At this moment, to the listener, it seems very likely that this is the actual start of the P theme and all preceding material is simply an introduction. However, the following continuation modulates into the dominant key of G major. This leads to a standing on the dominant and a large half cadence going into the next theme. It is now very apparent that indeed this is the transition theme. I call this a transition theme because it is its own special theme, not based on the preceding material. Once this lands on the medial caesura that I described earlier, we receive a hearing of a secondary theme in the dominant key of G major in the form of a period. As I play this next section, compare and contrast the style and overall sense of energy to the preceding material. This theme, in the form of a 8-measure period, confirms that we are in the dominant key of G major. It also introduces a triple meter feel into the piece. The only thing so far is that the overall energy level has not seemed to change. In fact, at this point, it seems that the secondary theme is almost a continuation of the transition theme, just in a new key. While this isn't unheard of in classical sonatas, what is interesting is what happens after the 8-measure period. Fragments of the preceding phrase begin to sequence until all of a sudden we have yet another cadence in the home key of C major. This is followed by the much more substantial half cadence in G major that you heard at the end of the excerpt. Following this is one final theme. This theme is played once by the strings of woodwinds and then once by the entire orchestra. Though it does not comprise a standard Kaplan theme type, it is made up of 3 statements of a basic idea and then a cadential idea each time. Unlike the first secondary theme, S2, as I call it, shows a much more substantial change in character. This, combined with the more substantial preceding medial caesura, shows that this segment is the successful S theme. Thus, my model for the entire exposition is as follows: an introduction, which later becomes a primary theme, a primary theme, which upon further listening becomes the transition, a failed medial caesura and first secondary theme, and then a successful medial caesura and a second secondary theme. Given that there are 2 secondary themes, the second one also effectively replaces the closing theme. Moving on to the development. As I stated before, this section has your standard pre-core-core retransition model. The pre-core, based on the first secondary theme, explores the keys of A and F major before continuing on to the core. The core sequences through various tonalities and harmonies, using the secondary theme and the strings and the primary theme and the brass. From there, the retransition takes over, employing fragmentation of the sequences used in the core, landing on a large dominant cadence. However, instead of continuing on to the recapitulation from here, Beethoven takes a slight detour and revisits material from the third movement. After this detour, we finally get our large triumphant return to the primary theme. As you will notice, the recapitulation is identical to the exposition, other than the fact that it does not modulate. Everything from this point forward is the coda, consisting of fragmentation of each of the four themes from the movement. Also notice the closing presto section. The bass line is a final restatement of the opening motif of the first movement. After a final return of the opening triad from the beginning of the movement, the piece closes with no fewer than 29 bars of C major chords. Symphony No. 5 is one of the most dramatic pieces that Beethoven ever wrote. Sometimes labeled the Fate Symphony, the entire piece explores the struggle between forces of good and evil. The fourth movement is written to be not only a triumphant but also a very exciting victory. It is therefore not unusual that Beethoven would choose to write sometimes confusing and very quickly moving theme types in harmonic motion. This keeps the listener and the performers on their toes and only adds to the excitement of the last movement of Beethoven Symphony No. 5.